want to bring in former Chief of Staff under President Obama and Secretary of Commerce under President Clinton, Bill Daley. Bill, good to see you.
Thanks, Maria.
Well, you've been in business and you've been in government, so you're the perfect person to address this poll. What do you think about that?
I think it's pretty obvious. That's the way the American people have always felt. There is a problem for politicians in government. People will always pick the private sector over the politicians. They believe that it is the private sector and their own activities, whether it's working numerous hours, 2 jobs, going back to school to get retrained. They believe the success in the economy is about the private sector, not the government. The government can stymie things. They can encourage growth, as I think President-elect Trump is trying to say he wants to do. But the people will not give politicians credit for success in the marketplace.
It seems to me that not all businesses are in alignment with the interests of the country, right? I mean, so what do you think about all these business guys in the Trump cabinet? I raise this because, like, for example, the other day, Boeing, the top story in the Wall Street Journal, having done that big deal with Iran. Now, obviously, Boeing was encouraged to do that by the Obama administration. But sometimes, you know, a big deal for Boeing to sell all of those planes to Iran may not be in the interest of America. So what do you think, for example, of billionaire investor Wilbur Ross as incoming Commerce Secretary, or you know, Steve Mnuchin as Treasury, or Rex Tillerson?
Certain offices have a pattern of having business people in them, whether they be Commerce, Treasury. State Department is a rare exception to take someone right out of business and put them in there. But the challenge for each of these people will be to make that transition from their individual focus, which it was as CEO, to a broader interest, not just the United States of America, but the free world in which we lead, especially Mr. Tillerson, who is very bright, very successful, obviously, has a wealth of knowledge. But to make that transition, that he doesn't just speak for a company, obviously he speaks for the United States of America, but also on behalf of the free world. When people talk about us in Russia or us in China, the U.S. is the point person, basically, point government, for those positions that the rest of the free world, who stands with us, especially our allies, feel on certain issues.
And of course, Wilbur Ross will be very much in charge of trade and trade issues. I spoke with him the day of the announcement.
Our #1 priority is sustained 3 to 4% GDP, and I think it's very achievable. I mean, this has been an administration for the last 8 years where we haven't had enough growth. Our #1 priority is going to be tax reform. We think that by lowering the corporate tax rate, we're going to make U.S. corporations incredibly competitive and create enormous amounts of money that comes back onshore and creates jobs.
And, of course, that was Stephen Mnuchin, the incoming Treasury Secretary, sitting with Wilbur Ross, the Commerce Secretary. You served as U.S. Secretary of Commerce under President Clinton. What are your thoughts on Wilbur Ross's role ahead?
Well, he's been very strong on the need for reform in trade policies, as has the President-elect. So to see that implemented, it is easy to say and difficult to do without having an impact not only on us, but also with our allies. So the Commerce Secretary is about trying to build exports to the rest of the world of U.S. products and help our economy. I think Mr. Ross has spent his life very successful and has been very aggressive against trade violations that he believes his companies have been affected by. Now he's got to switch to a certain degree and represent the entire United States government and the policies that the President-elect will put forward. They aren't his individual policies.
Do you think he's the kind of guy to institute tariffs?
Well, I think that's a serious question.
Not only that's a threat?
Well, it's a threat, but, you know, one learns in business, as Mr. Ross would know, you never threaten unless you're really willing to implement those threats. Because if someone calls your bluff, you better be willing to act. And implementing tariffs is a major potential problem for our economy, not just to punish someone else. So it's a threat, but you better not make it unless you're willing to do it.
Give us the worst-case scenario. What if the U.S. puts a tariff, not 35%, but some tariff, on Chinese goods coming into the U.S., what happens?
It costs the American consumers more in the products. Does it guarantee, over long term, the theory is you will build up demand and you will build up production in the U.S.
But in the near
that
term,
takes a while. Near term, it hurts, and
because
it hurts
it's
our
much
economy.
more expensive.
And we are in a global world, and many of our companies, the most successful and the largest, and some of the largest employers, are dependent upon that ability to make their product around the world and ship it not only to the U.S. but to other places.
Yeah.
And you can be assured, if we do take those actions, other countries will do that to our
and
products.
that's going to be trade
and
war.
then
That's
you have
the
a
problem.
difficult situation.